And now, here's your host of Shaping Success, Wes Tankersley. What's up, everyone? We're back. It's been a little bit of time, about a week. We didn't make it last Wednesday. For once, someone else had some sleeping issues. My son has been I gotta knock on that wood, sleeping all right, but Robert had some trouble sleeping last week, so we didn't do the Wednesday edition, but we're back today. What's up, Robert?
Wow, you want to set agendas. You know, this is the one time I came in on Monday morning, I didn't have anything to say, right? So, no, I mean, it's there's this phrase that sits on my desk. It's called beware the vividness of transient impressions. Okay. In other words, things change, right?
Yeah.
And we think that things that are set in stone, right, are always going to be, especially having this interesting conversation in my propaganda class, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I've got all 20 somethings in there. And so they don't know a world where you don't have social media.
Right.
And so they said that they don't trust people that wouldn't have a social media footprint.
Yeah, that's a little weird.
Yeah, but in their world, it's like, well, you have to have a social media footprint. What are you, on the moon? I'm like, okay.
I'm thinking about that because in reality, like that other thing, like that has a double-edged sword, right? Because most people know they can track you, they can figure out who you are based on social media. So like if you go and you Google someone and you can't find any information on them, it does make it a little bit different, right? Because that's the first place to go now. We jump on social media and we're like, we're gonna figure out who this person is before we have this conversation. I used to do that all the time with interviews. I'd go through and see how many people that I interviewed with because I don't want to ask the same questions, and you know maybe I'll learn a little bit about them that sparks those questions that you want to ask, right? But if you can't find them, then it makes it tough. Now it's a whole new deal.
Well, and my point to them was, why in the world would you believe a curated image? We
Yeah.
are our own PR agents. Okay. It's not like I come on this podcast and say crap that goes way outside the boundaries, right?
Yep.
I mean, you know, we're trying to be provocative in some cases and step on, you know, some sacred toes and stuff, but we don't go off. I mean, everybody kind of guards themselves, everybody filters.
Right.
But I mean, on social media, you know, you take 3 pictures, right? Do you
Yep.
choose the worst one or the best one? I mean,
Yeah.
that
It's
becomes a little insane after a while, right?
Yep. Well, and I start to think about it a little bit too. I mean, I know you've talked about this before, like the like quotes you pop in the morning on TikTok. It's kind of like you sometimes have to go through 3 times before you get it the way that you want it. Um,
Hmm.
I feel like a lot of times with TikTok for myself, like you do the old, you look at yourself in the mirror. Oh, do I like that with sunglasses, without sunglasses, this, that, blah,
Oh,
blah,
yeah.
blah. But all I really do for me on TikTok anyway is it's just doing it, right? But then when you get to like Instagram, I'm a little bit more like, hey, I'm not going to put this on there. I'm going to put this on there. You know, like it's kind of weird how you do, like you said, you curate it, you pick and choose what people get to see. So they never see the bad things that go on. And that's why I try to post a little bit of everything on TikTok, because I want people to know that just because I'm positive all the time doesn't mean that there's not those times that are negative that drive you down and drag on you, right?
Yeah. And that's the impression people get of me too. It's like, am I happy all the time? And the answer is, yeah, basically. But that doesn't mean I don't have a bad day.
Right.
That doesn't mean I don't sit there one time and go, okay, this really sucks. Right.
And the bad day,
But
though, is like what you make of it, right? Because you can let that
yeah,
destroy you. And I think that, like with me, I've learned over time that it may take me a little less time to recover from the shitty situation that has happened, but um, it is tougher. Like if you don't deal with that, like if you don't find a way to get through it or get over it or not care what other people think because they don't know you. I saw Aaron Rodgers talking about taking advice. He says, never take advice from someone you wouldn't, have in your life. You wouldn't have a conversation with. You don't respect. Why would you take advice from that person when they don't even live the way that you live? Right.
very true. And again, celebrities, all of us are subject to, completely unfair criticisms based upon some little snippet. And I've always said, I don't want to be judged in life on my worst day, and I don't want to be judged in life on my best day,
Right.
right? I guess I just want to be judged on the average of how things go.
Yeah.
And so, but listening to these young people, I call them young people because they are very young compared to me,
Hmm.
you know, they're not curious. They're really not curious about the world. And their depth of understanding of history. Now you got to remember, these are all educated. These are all seniors, graduate students, PhD candidates. These are all people who are academically at least pushing the edges of the boundaries. And I'm asking myself, why aren't you curious?
Yeah.
Why do you not know how things are? Why haven't you not made it to the sausage factory? Why did you not? Maybe it was just my generation because it was like, you're going to learn to change brakes on a car. You're going to learn to set the timing. You're going to learn to change the oil. You're going to learn how a car works. So if you pop the hood, you'll be able to do pretty much all the maintenance that's necessary, right?
Yeah.
Everything was about, in my generation, everything was about the how things worked, right? Everything was about learning and getting advanced capabilities, that kind of thing. And I don't know, maybe it's the Google generation, right? That everything's at their fingertips.
Yeah.
So they don't have to care or they don't have to look. I don't know.
Yeah. It's just interesting. I agree. Like I kind of feel like it's probably. I was talking to someone the other day about it. I was at their house and we were going through stuff, and I was just selling them window covering, but they were talking about how like we were talking about college, right, and the student loan thing that's going on right now. Where
Mhm.
I don't know if you're familiar, if you have any student loans. I obviously you might not have that situation like I do, where I have a lot of student loans, but the reason I went to college, or the reason why I thought that I should have gone to college, was because everyone told us, right? Like they're like, you need to go to college. My parents are like, don't end up like me. My dad was an ag the whole
Right.
time that I was growing up. He had to work really hard. You know, he's going to work at 5 o'clock in the morning, getting home at 6:30, 7 o'clock during harvest, maybe even later. Um, and he would sit there and talk about how you don't want to be like me. You don't want to do what I did. You don't want to learn how to do these things. And it's funny how for me, that's all I ever wanted to do was learn the things that he knew, because I respected that and I knew that he was a hard worker. And to see that
Right.
happen, and so we get to this generation, my generation, like I am the very end of Gen X, right? Like born in 1980. You look at a chart, it might say that I'm a millennial. It might say that I'm Gen X. Like it says it either starts like 78 to 81 or whatever. And but my generation was go to college, go to college, go to college. Everyone needs to go to college. Let's give everyone this money, right? Let's do this. Everyone, we're going to give you money. We're going to give you money. Now everyone goes to college, but they don't learn the things that I learned in high school. Like my daughter is in fifth grade, hasn't even had homework yet. And it's insane to me because they don't know the history of the country. They're learning snippets of things. They're rewriting history. They're not teaching you those things. Basically, you're going to college just to check a box, because if you have that box checked, then you can move on. You can be more successful or make more money, but all you have to do is check the box, right? Take this test, follow this guide, do this. And it's a different thing, you know?
So, I graduated from high school in 1979.
Hmm.
So my world was completely different. It was only the top quarter of my high school class, the top quarter
Right.
that went to college. And
Hmm.
remember, that top quarter had two distinctly different tiers in it. You had the people that went to tier one schools and people that went to tier two schools. And for those who do not understand, a tier one school is a school that has all the grants. It is research. It is going to be harder than hell. Okay. Designed that way. Tier two is going to be, again, people who are making progress, but they're not going to heavy research.
Right.
And that's how the world got separated. So that was it. So I went to Texas A&M at that point, and there was a bunch of people that went with me. By the end of the first year, 2/3 of those were gone.
Yep.
They were leaving a tier one school, going to tier two schools because they said this crap's hard.
Right.
And I was like, yes, it is. And so that was the filter. So when you got out of college or got out of college and went to your first job, you got 2 or 3 job offers. Why?
Right.
Because there was a very small pool of college graduates.
Yeah. I
Different
mean,
world.
yeah, I look at it like athletics. Like people don't really understand that it's kind of the same thing. It's like college was just kind of like that. Like there were some people who went to college to play sports, and there's some people who don't. You know, your top athlete may be he goes from being the top athlete at your school to being like a bottom end athlete at a college, and it doesn't make sense to me that people think that everyone should go to college, that everyone should have the same thing. And now we have this situation where no one wants to do a trade because we don't even have trades in high school anymore. Like cut the shop, cut the ag program, cut this, cut that. And then now we don't have these people to do these things that are very important because it's not worth it to them.
Yeah, and and the weirdest part is that even if you went to college, in my day, everybody went to metal shop. Everybody went to wood shop. Why? You needed to learn how to work with your hands.
Yeah.
Granted, there were people better at it and worse at it. And there was this separation when you went into the first year of high school. There was this separation. These are the kids that are going to go to advanced class because they're going to college. These are the kids who are going to go over to the VT program. And they had it, right? And so you understood kind of how you could learn skills along the way. Well, they took all that out.
Right.
And now, you get out of high school, you want to go on to be a welder, you're going to make $100,000 a year as a welder.
Yep.
Why? Because there's no one out there doing it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's an interesting dichotomy we created ourselves, and we've also created. We talked about this before, $500 million athletes.
Mm-hmm.
Really? I mean, I think we've got this a little bit confused, and I think as a country we need to come.
Yeah.
We need to sit down and talk to ourselves. Just
Yeah, we got to figure it out, but I don't know if that's ever going to happen. I mean, I feel like it's to the point where I don't know, someone's going to have to come in and have to prop up the things that we destroyed and took down, right? Like because that
yeah,
even history is one of those things in my mind that we can sit here and we can take down all these things and we can like they're pulling down statues and things like that to try and forget those things that we actually, put us where we are today, that have helped us be who we are today, help us be better. Because as much as you see how negative this country is and the things that are going on, there's a lot of good things going on.
hmm
We talked, you talk about that. Like we sit here and we look at like these negative comments that you get sometimes, and you're like, oh my gosh, that one negative comment on that post could ruin your day, but there's 100 positive ones. That's the same way that we look at things. Like we see the news and we see the negative things going on, but no one pushes out the positive stuff.
Well, media, and it just so
Yep.
happens, I'm doing this master's in communications, so I spend a lot of time studying media, and media has always had a model, and it's either fiction or friction,
Yep.
all right? And if that's the only two things, and they used to say the comment, if it bleeds, it leads, right? The more graphic, the more dramatic. But the reality is that the media isn't interested in you know, good stories. It really isn't interested in feel good stories. Why? Because it doesn't garner people's attention. Oh yeah, that person got something good. We are obsessed with this tale of mythology too. We tear people down. All that is all built into our culture.
Hmm.
And if we just stopped for a second and said, there's a reason I don't watch the news.
Yeah.
I don't want to see it. You're not gonna. No, if I want to check the weather, I'll check a weather app. I don't have to listen to the nightly news to get the weather for tomorrow.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, and that's where it is. It's at the touch of your hand, so you don't have to see what you don't want to see. It's all about where you go drive yourself to go and find what you're trying to find.
Right, and I've that's the one thing that it's hard for me to see people tear at the country like the country is the government. The country is not the government. The government is the government.
Right.
Our country is the collection of people who, by and large, doesn't matter what race, creed, or color you are, by and large, are good people.
Hmm.
By and large, are people that would give you the shirt off the back. By and large, are people that pick themselves up by their own bootstraps. By and large, that's what, if there was anything exceptional about America, it's its people.
Yep.
It isn't necessarily its traditions because, we got some ugly things in our past that we should not be proud of.
Right.
But as a people, you watch a disaster take place because I live on the Gulf Coast. You watch a disaster take place and you watch people step up and help their neighbor, right? And they don't get anything out of it. Nothing. Just helping their neighbor. It's amazing how good people can be. It's just amazing. And we don't see that. So we think that we're a polarized country. We think we're this because the media tells us we are. And are we going to sit down with somebody from the far left and say we have nothing we can agree upon? That's
Right.
not true. We have lots we can agree upon. We agree upon how we want our kids to be more successful than us. We want our kids to grow up in a happy, healthy home, right? We think across the board people should love who people want to love. I mean, this is not really that complicated. We really don't disagree on that much. But that doesn't play in the media market.
Right.
You can't play, hey, everybody gets along. It's just not entertaining, right?
Yeah. No, that's the thing. That's not what drives in sales. That's not what drives in, and unfortunately, it's just the way that people are wired. Like they are attracted to that. Like we talked about. You really think about the negative stuff as something that really bothers you, and you think about that and you give it more weight than you give positive stuff. So it's a choice to have to, and we were talking a little bit earlier about it. It's a choice. Like I feel like once you start to make that choice to not let that negative stuff affect you the same way that you do, it never goes away. It never stops affecting you, but it affects you in a different way where you can let it go. You can let it roll off a little bit easier. And I talked to my daughter about that because she comes home saying this and that this kid said this to me and this kid said that to me. And I'm just like, just let it roll off. Just let it go. And it's easy to say, but that's the one thing that I want to give my kids is the idea that they don't have to let that stuff bother them because they take everything so to heart anymore because that's all they see. That's all they hear.
Mhm. Right. And the thing that disturbs me most is that we can't have a debate anymore.
Yeah.
We can't have a debate because there's only got to be one answer to everything.
Hmm.
And I'm like, there isn't one answer to everything.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, you and I will look at something from two different perspectives, the same exact thing. And if we're asked to pick out the positives, we both will say generally kind of the same thing, but it won't be the same.
Yeah.
And so we're not celebrating for all of our cultures. Let's celebrate diversity. Diversity of everything except for thought.
Right.
And that's scary because those who all think the same don't think very much, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're trying to struggle with as a culture having it's like this election, right? Everybody's pitching it as it's going to be so different. These one person's going to ruin the country. Hold on a second. From one president to the next, you may not like what Biden did
Hmm.
and how the country has gone, but the country hasn't been destroyed.
Yeah.
And Trump was in for 4 years and the country wasn't destroyed, right?
Yep.
Obama was in for 8, the country wasn't destroyed. You may not be happy with what you pay at the supermarket, which I'm not, but the country wasn't destroyed.
Yeah.
And I don't believe the next guy's going to, or girl's going to destroy the country. So that's just a silly argument.
Yeah, and it's funny. I think the big thing for me is just like watching how people can't see, you know. But the thing is 50% of this country feels one way, 50% of this country feels the other way. The House and the Senate are separated. I mean, it's one of those things where no matter what happens, it's going to taper out. But we sit here and we argue back and forth about what's what, you know. Um, we just have to do our due diligence. We just have to do the studying of the process. We have to look at that. We have to go out and vote. And don't be it's insane to me to listen to like my little brother sits here and complains all the time about one side or the other, and then he doesn't even vote. I mean, how can you complain about that when you don't even vote, when you don't even do your part? It's insane to me.
And I work for an organization on the West Coast and do some strategic planning for them and some and grant writing and all. But we're going to start working on a political literacy program. In other words, we're not pitching one side or the other. We're just pitching, do you know how many people there are in Congress? Do
Yeah.
you know what the Electoral College is? Do you understand how to vote? Do you understand that states and the federal government run a different system? Do you know that we are not in a democracy?
Yeah.
The nation is not a democracy. I know. It's so hard. It's called a republic for a reason.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's the literacy part. You just, the simpleness of understanding where you live and understanding that your state is a democracy. By and large, all 50 states are democracies. There's not a republic in them. But as a nation, we're a republic.
Yeah.
And so they're like, no, that's not true. You have an electoral college, folks. You do not, the guy who gets or woman who gets 50.01% does not run the country.
Yeah.
It's the person that wins the electoral college. Why was that created? So that the little states, actually, the whole thing was created so that we didn't end up with the problem we have today,
Hmm.
which is 4 or 5 states making the decision for the entire country.
Right. So it's not working.
This is not an election anymore. This is
Yeah.
not an election. We're all going to go vote, but it's not an election in
Right.
the sense that it's Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. They're going to be the ones deciding for the entire country.
Yeah.
So, do you notice that you don't have people campaigning in your state?
It's
Why?
funny. It's funny because I noticed that the other day. I was thinking about this every single time I see anything, which I know why. Like, but it's funny that you brought it up because how many times have you seen in the news that like Trump, Vance, and Harris and Walz are all in Pennsylvania? Like they
Mhm.
have been in Pennsylvania every single time. Yeah, see Nikki saying they're all over Pennsylvania because she's in Pennsylvania. That's what I've noticed though. Like, and that's because that's one of the states that is gonna, tip the scales. And it's funny because that's all you see. They're in Pennsylvania, they're in Georgia, they're in Arizona. They're in these states where it's gonna tip the scales, but they don't know. They already know. I mean, like Idaho, they got Idaho. Who cares? They
Yeah,
they got
they have
Texas. Who
Texas.
cares? Like, why
Yeah,
would they mess
that's
with
it.
it? That's those states that they know that they don't have. They're campaigning in. It's weird.
Right. So we don't have an election for president in Texas.
Uh-huh.
Yes, we're going to go vote, but there's nothing going on here.
Right.
Now, the Senate races and stuff are important, but there's nothing going on at the presidential level because they go box check. Okay, and so this is what we were trying to avoid.
Yeah.
We were trying to avoid where this small group of people make a decision for everybody.
Hmm.
A democracy was supposed to be it's for lack of a better word, it's the tyranny of the majority.
Yeah.
Whatever the majority wants. But that's not where we've found ourselves in. We're found ourselves in a position where there's a very, very, very small group of people making the decision for the entire country.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny too because if you like the thing that really makes sense to me is that if they got rid of the electoral college, if you think about it, it's going to be the popular vote. Now, it might not swing the way that I want it to, but that's it. Like the majority of the country has decided, it's it's the reality of it instead of like it is right now where, just because you have a large populace of a state, you get 50 votes out of the pool and it just doesn't make any sense because then no matter what that those big states are historically voting the same way every single time.
Right. But it doesn't get interesting because now you would have, if you went by just straight vote, you would see Democrats in Texas trying to get votes because every vote would count.
Yep.
You'd have Republicans in California going, hey, vote for me. I'm not going to win California, but it doesn't matter because I'm on number of votes. There's a crap load of people here.
Hmm.
And I need the Republicans to come out. So what it would do, strangely enough, is it would cause campaigns to get hideously expensive.
Yeah.
People are saying they're going to spend $1 billion. Each candidate is going to spend $1 billion to get elected. And they're really only going to campaign in about 6 or 7 states.
Hmm.
Can you imagine if they had to campaign in 50?
Yeah.
Legitimately.
Yeah, they'd have to change the way that they do it because I don't think there's enough money for people to give them donations to make that
No,
happen.
no, no. And it would change the entire composition of how things are done, right? People would
Yep.
actually be, again, this is what we've chosen. Our founders chose this. We've manipulated it somewhat along the years, but that's what we've chosen. And you can complain every year about how it goes, whether it goes for you or against you, but that's the system we have. If you don't like it, 2/3 of the state can come together and change the Constitution.
Yeah.
All you have to do, just change it.
Well, I think that this conversation that we're having starts to make you really think about the fact that on a state level, it really makes a lot of sense to take care of the state portion of that as well. Because like when you go in to vote, everyone historically just thinks about, oh, the president, right? But what about all the other things that are going on in your state? Because if you vote for the leaders in your state in a way that does not meet the standards of what your state wants, they're the ones who make the actual decision. The president is the one who signs off on what the Senate and the House do. So you need to make sure that you vote for the representatives, you vote for your senators, you vote for those people that run your actual state, because those people are going to Washington and making the decisions for you.
Absolutely. And also, too, we remember that our governors are important, our mayors are important, right? Really important. Why? All politics are actually local.
Yep.
And you've been tricked into believing that your state is ran out of Washington. It's not. It's ran out of your capital.
Yep.
The majority of what happens in your state is in your capital. And so that's something you need to be involved. So any kind of political literacy says, hey, listen, do you know what the dog catcher does in your neighborhood? Do you know what a sheriff is? Do you know what your mayor is? Do you know what your form of government is?
Yep.
Most of the time, people don't. Matter of fact, I'll bet you think people don't know who the president is. Ask them if they know who the governor is.
Right. Yeah. I know who mine is.
Yeah.
And that's funny. It's like, there's a lot of things that are going on, and like if you pay attention to that, you'll know. But there's a lot of people who don't,
Yeah.
So great conversation, Robert. I appreciate you hanging out with us. Thank you, everyone. Michelin, thank you for the rose this morning. Thank you, Carl, Nikki, everyone who is hanging out. Nikki's moderating in TikTok. We are live on YouTube. You can find us at Shaping Success with Wes Tinkersley on YouTube and pretty much anywhere else to follow the clips. Cassandra, thanks for hanging out. Everyone, join
Michelle,
us
thank you.
Wednesday. We will be going through another chapter of Robert's book, Ars Victorious. Monday is a conversation. Wednesday is a conversation as well, but we have a little bit of topic usually, and we appreciate y'all being here.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.
Yep, we will see you next time.